My name is William Ray Noack from Tomball, Texas, just north of Houston. Ladies and gentlemen who represent America, I appeal to you now because our courts no longer represent the justice they once stood for. I was subjected to years of abuses by a former employer which hid behind its famous religious name as they callously drove me from my job and career and economically ruined me when I refused to participate in wrongful activities. I disliked the idea of legal action, but found them unreasonable and unwilling to be fair. So I went ahead with a pro se lawsuit. After all, if I didn't do something, who would? And it all affected more than myself alone. Still, I had endured much, and the unpaid overtime was like slave labor. I also didn't want to do wrong or harm my conscience through discrimination against men and African Americans. During the legal process, the district magistrate ignored the fact that evidence showed years of ongoing discrimination, which meant, legally, the employer could be held liable for the entire time period. Instead of regarding the evidence in the correct legal light, she assumed and discarded my sworn testimony as if false, when the only side shown to have given false testimony was the employer. If uncertain, she should have asked questions, but instead curtailed discovery, making it less likely that I'd get much more evidence. Yet, I still showed evidence of ongoing discrimination, but the facts were ignored. The whole thing was a sham. The NPO repeatedly subverted the law as they withheld evidence, fraudulently claimed to divulge evidence they had not sent as proven, and more. They even disclosed court-ordered evidence on an encrypted CD and withheld significant material evidence in violation of court orders, while simultaneously filing for summary judgment. And what they did submit supported the claims of discrimination against blacks and men, particularly in pay. The magistrate then refused to enforce her own orders twice, giving no reason, while the law stipulates that the refusal to comply with court orders is just grounds for a default judgment in my favor. Also refused. Fact is, there was no disciplinary action at all. I provided documents showing my opponent, a huge, wealthy YMCA, had blatantly lied to the Labor Board, and that the Labor Board then dropped the case without questioning any YMCA witnesses. Other documents proved the YMCA submitted perjurious affidavit testimony, unless it was totally forged, which is also the possibility, because those signatures don't seem to match. Well, the judge even cited the perjurious testimony, although it had been proven false. Furthermore, if taken in my best light, as required by law at the summary judgment stage, email evidence showed the YMCA targeted me for retaliation and plotted towards it in scripted detail. At one point, they gave me a disciplinary write-up for 1 hour of valid overtime, which they said was unauthorized. It was overtime required of me by both my YMCA duties and state regulations, and my supervisor could have avoided the overtime had she wanted to. I also showed the hour of overtime occurred during the time of 1 to 2 months in which I was required to do in 40 hours a week work that normally took 80 employee hours, and that failure to do it all would have placed me in danger of being fired. This was all indicated by documented evidence to the court. Additionally, documentation was secretly taken from one of 5 YMCA child care sites listed under my name as director with state child care officials. The YMCA pretended to know nothing of the missing documents and endangered my public reputation and professional standing with Texas DFPS. Yet, after I made known I had found a witness to the act, they finally confessed during a court hearing. I also showed emails in which I pleaded with my employer against alleged orders to discriminate against blacks and men. Yet my supervisor, in reply, gave a reason for her commands. I proved to the court that reason was illegal discrimination by EEOC law and definition, as it involved no business necessity. The courts ignored the law and instead held to an old standard that has not been in effect for over 20 years, since the Civil Rights Act of 1991. My sworn notarized affidavits and deposition statements showed strong evidence of illegal discrimination covering many years and up to my leaving the YMCA. Those troubles included repeated physical assaults, threats of the same, disparate wages and other disparate treatment, unpaid overtime, repeated open ridicule, sexist email communication, etc., and a quote of my supervisor ranting, "I hate men," all in a female-dominated office and department. There was direct evidence of reverse discrimination, yet I was casually driven out of court despite it all, despite the law and despite the U.S. Constitution's 7th Amendment, which guarantees the right to a trial by jury. I appealed, and the hearing transcripts were tampered with, doctored, after I was ordered to divulge why I felt I needed them. Then a lone female judge at the Fifth Circuit Court in a case involving reverse discrimination refused to accept my sworn testimony as a self-litigant about the inaccuracy of the transcripts, plus my motion asking for the legally required verbatim transcription and the still lacking evidence disclosures the district magistrate had ordered but had not allowed me to have. The lone Fifth Circuit judge decided the case would proceed with the evidence on record, not minding the evidence tampering or the faultiness and incompleteness of court records in any attempt at even-handed justice. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals cast me out and whitewashed the case in their findings, just as the district court had done. When I appealed en banc, I was given a bogus rule citation as an excuse for pushing it into a panel rehearing instead, where the same 3 judges refused to acknowledge they'd messed up. Well, how many important people who ignore the law and the facts are going to say they messed up? Dumbfounded at the injustices and irregularities and seeing that the Fifth Circuit panel had made several false statements in their decision, I sent a petition for writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court with high hopes. After all, I knew the lower courts had violated the law, blatantly ignored many legal precedents, tossed aside the facts and evidence, and stepped all over my constitutional rights. I knew the Supreme Court justices were sworn to uphold the law and Constitution. My facts were strong, and the YMCA's evidence consisted basically of a mere handful of affidavits, some already shown to be polluted by error and perjury. Beyond that, they tried to use some of my deposition statements in which they'd whited out about half of the pages to use them out of context. Fact is, that deposition was bogus too. The law says there should be examination and cross-examination as if in court, but I, as self-litigant, had not been allowed to so much as speak for myself relevant testimony to the questions in lieu of the cross-examination normally done by an attorney. They had intended to bring me back for multiple days of questioning, but I told them I knew that was unlawful, so they dropped that idea. Big problem. Somehow, the Supreme Court refused to take up the case at all. Was I foolish to think they would care or dare to act rightly for a common and poor man such as myself, an average American worker? Sure, they had lots of cases, but they swore oaths. Can it be that if someone simply messes you over far enough, people simply run out of room and all the corruption goes unanswered like it's nothing? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are our checks and balances. That's part of your job description. The judicial corruption in my case needs to be investigated. Court corruption against a working class needs to end now, and corrupt judges need to be impeached. We don't need willful injustice and cronyism. I and other Americans need justice. I've been greatly harmed and reduced to living in tents for 4 years. 4 years due to it all. I've lost my career, professional credentials, and state license, and my new economy car that I bought for my job has been repossessed. America needs justice. Without it, trust and hope fly out the window, and we could eventually see a darker America full of hate and violence. Courts that practice cronyism drive wedges of doubt, bitterness, and division into our society, and it's not good for anybody. Is that worth the harm it can do? Truth sets us free. Justice and mercy help us heal. Please, don't be lofty, darkened angels, uncaring. Honor your roles as God-appointed stewards. Come down and see. Give us some relief and help heal America. Thank you.